and welcome to the Virtual Business Owners Network on Friday, the 10th of November. And we're having a discussion which Sean is going to lead on operations. So I'll pass it over to Sean Hyland. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alec. Yeah, so I'm an operational specialist, and I suppose the first thing maybe we should do is to figure out exactly what are operations, because a lot of companies don't really understand them. And operations are the way you conduct your activities, everything you do. So when I say I'm a specialist in operations, I'm a specialist in all the different ways that businesses work. And they're all different, but yet they're all the same. And so I look at specific areas. So say for every business, we'll have different business functions like finance or supply chain, operations themselves, how they go about their business. They're all different areas of the business, but they're all interconnected. And one of the biggest problems that businesses have are they don't treat them like they're interconnected. They're different departments with different people. Information is shared in different ways. People have different systems of managing their departments. And sometimes this can cause a lot of problems. So when I look at operations, when I go in and look at companies, I look at what their workflows are. First, I look at their revenues and see how they do them. How do they actually do all the elements, right from marketing to delivery of the product, after sales service, for every single revenue stream, because they're going to be different. I look to see who's responsible, who does what, who are the key people. I look at what technologies they're using or what systems they have. And I look at what documentation is being generated and why. And so I suppose it's different for bigger companies and smaller companies. So today I'm just going to talk about the operations of smaller companies, because most of the people on the virtual VBON are small companies. And so what I want to talk about is how you do your business and how you look at it. So when I walk into a business, as I did this week with that energy company, I asked them a simple question: do you have your operations documented? And the answer was the same as it always is: no, we don't. And then I said, well, how do you know when things are working and things aren't working? And they couldn't answer that question. I asked them if they had a business plan, and they said, yes, they had. I asked them if they had a strategy, and they said, yes, they had. And I asked them, was that documented? And they said, yes, it was. So bigger companies have documented business plans and they have strategies. And just to kind of maybe get into that for a second, you decide what your vision is, and then you plan to achieve that vision. And then the strategy is the way you're going to do it. And you spend time with different people with different ideas, and you come together and you formulate that plan and you say, right, here's we're going to be, what needs to happen with our people, with our technologies, all the things I just mentioned, in order to make that happen. But for the smaller company like ourselves, that tends not to happen. And I suppose the two biggest areas of difference I see between a small company and a big company is that smaller companies do not invest in themselves. And if you look at the kind of companies that become successful, they're the kind of companies that look outward. They have consultants. They belong to different networks and groups. They're constantly searching for ideas, and they're looking for ways to make their business better than that of their competition. But a lot of us kind of sit in our offices, we do the kind of things we like doing, and we just kind of get on with life without ever having a plan. And sometimes nice things happen, but mostly it doesn't. It doesn't happen without the planning. So investment is one big difference. And the other big difference is the use of data. So one of the big things that I would introduce to small businesses is a relational database. So it's a methodology of managing every element of your business, because after all, it's all interconnected. So within that, you'd have different sections, which would maybe be clients, services, contractors, finance, invoicing, quotations, all of that. What we want to do and what we set out to do is to make it all one system, not several different systems. And by doing that, it's easier to analyze it and it's easier to share information. So a good example would be a lot of smaller companies would operate on email and telephone. So there's loads of telephone calls made and loads of emails, loads of spreadsheets that are all individual pieces of information that are shared in a system that has to be searched when you want to go back and do it. And one of the beauties of the relational database is that you operate everything from within that database. So when your client contacts you at first, say you have you're on Facebook and you're doing some ads, what generally happens for a small business is that ad comes in on an email. Then they upload it into some CRM. And then there's a whole series of emails that go on. All of this activity is not connected. And in order to find out, at what status a particular lead is, you have to go and search through for a whole load of different information. And there's this constant search. The left hand often doesn't know what the right hand is doing. You have different people in the businesses having different ways of doing things. So when we go into a business, we start to look at the different things. So the people, are they all doing the thing, the activities of the company in the same way? Because we want to simplify it, number one, and then we want to standardize it, number two. And finally, when them pieces are done, we want to systemize it so that we can keep an eye on it. And the data that's being generated, we would create dashboards for our clients so that they know what's coming up, and it simplifies the processes of forecasting and managing the life cycle of each particular customer you have. So we'd also have a look at the customer experiences, because they're also people, and we want to make it easy for the customer to buy off us. So that might mean looking at what our competition are doing and making it easier and simpler, just even to connect to ourselves, to get the services and to pay for them even. That we make it as easy as possible, because quite often people that are searching for a service or a product will buy from the easiest place. It isn't always about the cheapest. We also would look at, let me see here, the other things that we'd look at. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we look at the processes and the way you do things. And a lot of people describe our services as process improvement. So we break every process down. We look at why it's being done that way. Are we doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing? And is the stuff that we should be doing we're not doing? And we go through that process, process by process, across the whole workflow of each revenue stream. We'd be looking at the technology being used. So for small businesses, quite often they're using a lot of different technologies, and this leads to a lot of duplication and data input in more than one area, but the same data. So a lot of time being wasted. In terms of some of our customers, the problem for them is that they're getting bigger and they're trying to hire people, but then people aren't there. And then when they look at what their people are actually doing, a lot of it is heavy administration that could possibly be automated. And that's another thing we would look at doing, is stuff that happens again and again, standardized stuff that needn't be done by a human being, to take this work out of their workflow and allow the system itself to complete them. For example, sharing information or moving from one process to another. A good example would be, say, for example, when you've won work and you want to schedule the work. In a lot of companies, it can be phone calls and emails and all this kind of stuff in order to get that work scheduled. And we can go in, if we can standardize how it's done, we can actually get the system to do it. And people share information and they upload and download what they need. And it's all in the same central system. So we're not putting it in again and again into different softwares and using different technologies. Some of the documentation that's being generated as well, like quotations and systems and all that, a lot of these can be automated as well, so that time spent greatly reduced. One of the biggest areas in terms of, if you do have a relational database, is you now have access to all that data in one place. And in terms of growing the business further, you'll be able to see what's working and what's not working, where the bottlenecks are, and identify areas where decisions need to be made. But the decisions can be data driven, and it's proof. The proof is always in the detail. And when you learn how to look at the data you're collecting, it helps greatly in terms of the future development of the business. So they're the areas we look at. In terms of the smaller businesses, you have maybe one or two people that are doing everything, and sometimes it's a complete waste of resources. I'll give you a good example. I used to be very bad at this myself. Would be marketing, and so rather than investing in bringing in somebody who knows marketing inside out, we tend to make a bit of time for it, do a little bit of work. After a few weeks, we get sidetracked by something else, and we end up not doing anything with that again until maybe 6 months later. And this kind of piecemeal way that we go about it, we didn't know anything about it in the first place. And then we're trying to do it ourselves. And maybe we're learning from the internet, or we're reading books, or wherever we're getting our information. And that's time that could be used elsewhere. So a big part of what we look at too is the ability to outsource key elements of your business to people that are good at it. So yeah. So anyway, in summary, what we do is we go in and have a look at the way you operate your business. We make suggestions on future developments, and we help you put in place the tools and the resources in order to do that. So that's
all right. Well, thanks very much for that, Sean. I will leave the recording on for Q&A. Can I suggest if somebody has a question, you might put your hand up, and that will kind of keep some sort of order on it. But seeing that I'm first in, I won't put my hand up. I'll just get straight in. Quick one for you, Sean. I think a lot of people misunderstand the amount of time spent on duplicating entries into their systems because they're using so many systems. Would you just like to talk about that? Because I know Sean and myself have worked together, and I'm fascinated by the same entries being made multiple times in either individuals or factories and companies.
Yeah, so like an example of a major cost saving, we're actually Alec and I are working for one particular customer at the moment, and we're implementing a new process for the way that the invoicing is done. So, for example, previously, or the way it exists right now, is that this company sells a service and their customers pay a deposit. And once they pay the deposit, the work is scheduled. And so the way it works is you have a number of salesmen that are collecting deposits. Deposits appear in the bank, and then the bookkeeper spends half her life trying to find out who put the money in. And until they find out who put the money in, they can't schedule the work. So there's this constant barrage of emails and phone calls between salespeople and the bookkeeping staff, trying to figure out who's what and where to go next. So like we've gone in and automated some of that. So say for example, when you get your quote now, there's a link on it where you pay, where you can pay either interbank or via your credit card, how you can pay your deposit. And when your deposit is paid, it's done through Stripe. When your deposit is paid, the CRM we're using is marked. So the actual bookkeeper doesn't have anything to do with it at all anymore. Once it gets marked as paid, the work gets automatically scheduled, and then it bypasses the bookkeeper and goes straight to the sales team to organize for a particular contractor. And when that contractor takes it up, all the information that was previously gathered about that client is made available to the contractors so they can do their work. And their calendars and then the post-completion checklists are all part of it. It's all standardized, it's all simplified, and it's easy for them to make the communication. There's no phone calls, there's no emails, there's no errors. Well, there is, but let's say the percentage of errors has been reduced dramatically, something like 90%. So okay. Like that's an example of an automation that the bookkeeper has estimated, or one of them, the one I'm working with, has estimated that she's saving 2 weeks a month. Stuff that would have been, time that would have been.
That's from the duplication.
Yeah.
That's great, Sean. Thanks. John, you have a question there.
I have two questions and also a little bit of information. First question, Sean, when you're changing the system and you're documenting it, are you also implementing ISO standards into your system and procedures that you're doing for your clients? And the second thing, how do you overcome staff turnover? Let me give you an example. Cement Roadstone upgraded their purchasing cycle during the year of the Celtic Tiger. And the person who was involved in it, it's a lady I know, said to me they made one error in doing that. They didn't put in completed with the payment cycle as well. So subcontractors were finding it very, very difficult to get paid from Cement Roadstone. So when she went back in to upgrade it and put in the payment system, she found that all the people that she had been working with in Roadstone were gone. The turnover of staff there was very, very high. So how do you overcome that difficulty in your system? Like, do you provide for that in advising your clients? They're going to have a high turnover.
Well, like it's part of the, there's a few different questions there. Like part of the issues that companies have is retention of staff.
Yeah.
So, like, one of the things we look at is, when I talk about the customer journey and making it easy to buy and, making sure the customer's happy, quality control, and all these things about keeping the customer happy. We also do a piece about keeping the employees happy. And one of the biggest problems you'll have with employees is they're not sure what their roles and responsibilities are. And this is why it's very, very important to have proper processes in place and proper training. My experience, if it's the roles and responsibilities are very clear, and the employee is made to feel a part of the team, the amount of people that leave will reduce considerably. Now, obviously, if you treat them badly and you don't pay them well, but I'm saying generally, a big part of it is feeling part of the team. Their ideas, their contributions are listened to. They can see the stuff that they come up with is being listened to, and the changes are made to make their lives easier. They will feel part of the team, and that will become less of a problem. In terms of ISO standards, we don't set out standards in terms of, we don't have a specific product. And yes, we do it when it's part of our brief. But I suppose the difference between what we do and what other companies do is we don't have an ideology or a set system or intervention that we work with. We go in and spend some time with you guys, the customers, and see what it is that's important to them. And we build systems around the way they work already. So you don't have huge amount of training, and the systems reflect the way they already work. So there's very little to learn, or the learning part of it. It's all very familiar to them. So
can I just interject a piece there for you, Sean, too, to help out? John, I think what tends to happen, and it happened to me in a business when myself and Nick were involved a long time ago, by having a lot of processes and systems and the right one in place, ergo, we were virtually operating to an ISO standard. And it was only, and how that came about was somebody had asked us about it. Motorola, I think, was a client at the time, and we brought in an accreditation body to look at it, and they said, my goodness, the way you're doing things, the processes you're using, you're actually operating to that sort of level. However, what's missing is the documentation. So what Sean is doing is putting in those sort of systems, and the documentation is there to support it. So I would imagine that anybody who wanted to move on to ISO would be virtually 90+% in place to do it. And it's just some of the documentation. And by the way, in case you hear me using the word ISO, there's a reason for it. And I'll let Seamus in just a second. Yesterday, I interviewed, Damien from Enable ISO, and they are an accreditation body, and they put in these systems. And I said, and the first question I asked him is it ISO or ISO? He says, everybody gets it wrong. It's actually ISO. ISO means equal, and it's a sort of Greek term. So he said it's the International Organization of Standards, but in Ireland, they kind of call it ISO. But the true pronunciation is ISO. Anyway, that's a little aside, a piece of nonsense. Seamus.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. That was great. Could you speak a little bit about business reports and automating of business reports, or or how people can use that one source, that single relational database, to actually evolve their standard business reports, and maybe automate those business reports as well, from your experience.
Yeah. Well, so like, as I say, we do look at the documentation. So like, if you look at a business report, you're looking at, you're generally looking at, it could be a monthly sales report, or it could be, say, a customer report on what's going on with that particular customer. Like, if you're collecting that data as part of, you know, in terms of what we just discussed, a relational database. So you're collecting data from all different sources, but it's all in the same record. So rather than a bit of it here, a bit of it there, you know, it's all over the place, and you have to collect it in order to do a report. If it's all in the one place, all in the same record, becomes very easy to identify it. So you identify what it is you want, and maybe the dates and whatever other filters you want to do. And then we can generate like a standard template, say, that's highly designed. And the information is already on your database. We can just have, like, say, usually a report will have maybe 80% of it will be pretty generic, but the specific pieces come straight from your system, and we just put them in the same place on the report. So, like, for example, we have a client, in a GDPR client, and they do reports for their customers on a monthly basis, and they were doing them for like the 5 or 6 biggest ones, because of the time that was involved in creating these reports. And like, we've automated the whole thing now. So the reports self-create, and they even create the document. They'll even send the document automatically. And now they're doing it for all their clients. And so they have some clients, or maybe smaller clients, that are now getting a much higher value now, because they're getting these monthly reports, and they're able to understand what's going on in terms of the GDPR. But at no extra cost. Once it's set up, it works automatically then going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the Airtable that we use, sorry, Seamus, the Airtable that we use for these meetings is literally a collection of information that's just redistributed depending on. So people register, they're already registered, there's self-population of documents, and then how that information is portrayed either went to you, to a form that you filled in to say you're here today, to who appeared here today, to the one-to-ones. It's all in a singular place. So sorry, Seamus, that's just an example of it.
Yeah, and it's like an evolution, I think, is really. So once you put the relational database in place, I think it's part of the education process for the customer, I guess, to actually play with the reporting. And then, as you say, kind of automate that over time. So again, they're building automation into something that they're kind of evaluating and testing, I guess. Once all the data is in one place, they can play with which reports are the most high value reports or not, I guess. I think that's really where it was coming from. And I suppose that's the advantage.
Yeah, a very powerful thing is, I tend not to look at reports, like, say, in the old way you'd look at monthly reports. I tend to look at information as a live document. So, like, I'll frequently build dashboards for my customers and for their clients. So what do they really want to know? And, you know, over what time periods? And then I build the dashboard, so they don't have to go in and interrogate the system at all. They open up, they're looking at graphs, they're looking at stuff that's easy to query. And they're getting, you know, like, I would frequently say to a client that when I'm finished, you're going to know everything you want to know about what's going on in your business today in about 5 minutes. And that's the power. That's where the power is. So, like, there's also a piece of insight as well. So, like, I'm used to looking at data. So I'll frequently go back to my clients, and I'll come up with suggestions and ideas, simply because they're too close to the business to see some stuff. And a very good example would be with the same client we were talking about with Alec there. You know, they're scheduling works, and there's electricians and roofers involved, and the customer themselves, and they were scheduling all three together. So they wanted to get the roofer there, the electrician there, and the client available at the same time. And what was resulting was a lot of cancellations, and there was a lot of time being lost, because just trying to get all that together, them 3 different things to coordinate around one day or one morning, it just proved, you know, it often fell down. Somebody was sick or whatever. So we separated them out. So the electrician and the roofers didn't need to be there at the same time. So we scheduled them separately. And then we worked with in terms of the customers, we gave them a date, and we gave them a series of dates, and they picked one of them. And if they wanted to miss it, they went back in again, and they knew they'd have to go back into the system and wait for the next date. and it changed the amount of cancellations went down by 43% in 1 month. So like that's just something I'm looking at that. It's not necessary for them to be there, but it's handy. It was handy, but it's not necessary.
Yeah,
I think in terms of processes, and because it's one of the things I talk about in terms of strategic planning when I'm talking with clients and consulting with them, that you map out processes, and Sean is doing very much this on a much more, as they use today, granular level. I would be more high level looking at it. But the important part is when you have it mapped out, you have then an opportunity to decide whether that part of the process is either A, working, B, superfluous to your needs, or D, needs to be amended or a new piece put in. But it's only when it's actually visually in front of you and you can see that mapped out process. So Sean does that in a much more detailed way and then shows the interaction between the various departments, as you said, finance, HR, IT, whatever it is, and how they interact with one another. Sean and myself sort of do these workshops with the larger companies where we would talk to management about how this whole system works and what the benefits are. But no, Sean, as you can see, the system we use works very seamlessly, thanks to Sean, but that's at a very low level. Can I suggest, Sean, that we'll move on to our one-to-one meeting, or our meetings here today? But put in your details, Sean, in the box, that if anybody wants to talk to you, they'll find it. Actually, you've registered today, haven't you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so your details are there. So if anybody wants to follow that on, and can I say thanks very much, Sean? I do appreciate that. And I think at this time of the year, when everybody should be starting to take stock of what they're doing and planning for next year, which I'll be talking further about in the coming weeks, I think that should be under consideration. How can we reduce the amount of time we're spending duplicating information and doing a lot of things that could be done much more seamlessly? So thanks again, Sean, for that.